in here is on page 95, where we see the violin and Juliet. His name's pretty difficult. He is a Polish boy who is in the music department in another chapter on page 45. But on 95, we are seeing his last performance. So I'm trying to move my figure to read it to you. All right. Here at the edge of his own grave, or was it a hallucination? It had to be Juliet. He was playing a fragment of Beethoven Concerto. Never before had I heard such a beautiful sound in such silence. How had he succeeded in disengaging himself to slip out from under my body without my feeling it? The darkness enveloped us all. All I could hear was the violin, and if it was Juliet's soul had become his bow, he was playing his life, and his whole being glided over the strings. His unfulfilled hopes, his charred past, his extinguished future, he played that which he would never play again. I shall never forget, Juliet, how I could forget his concert given that day before an audience of dead and dying. Even today, when I hear that particular piece by Beethoven, I close my eyes, and out of darkness emerges a pale, melancholy face of my Polish comrade bidding farewell to an audience of dying men. And I don't know how long he played. I was overcome by sleep. When I awoke at daybreak, I saw Juliet facing me, hunched over dead. Next to him lay his violin, trampled, an eerily flamboyant little corpse. All right, so to begin with, obviously the violin broke, and that's significant in itself. But silence, as we've established before, is symbolic of fear and terror and apprehension. And there's this big motif of like breaking the silence, and we can see that in Madame Shatner on the train, how she was, how her screaming, everyone was very afraid of it, and it just brought an actuality to all their fears that was in the silence. And so they tried to silence her. So breaking the silence can be seen as rebellion, and him playing, especially the piece that he was told on page 45 not to play because it was German. So I related that to rebellion and breaking the silence. It was also, since Madame Shatner's was to like bring awareness, it's like a prophetic type thing. Here he's bringing awareness to all of the pain and suffering that they've come from. Such in the thing he said, he played his life. Okay. Yeah, so he was trying to explain all this suffering that they've gone through already. And it was just very symbolic of his life and the Jewish suffering in general. He was playing his whole life. The word whole, I related, can refer to his death. So it starts at the very beginning, going all throughout his life as though he's already dead. In the words hopes and past, this is his life before the war, and while he was still hopeful and young, and that's where this kind of beautifulness came from. And the allusions to fire, which we can relate to suffering and the suffrage, has destroyed his past with words like charred and extinguished. These are also kind of like the crematorium, which we all know is very, it's the suffering that they had to go through. And it was charred, thinking of irreparable, which we can relate to the theme of lost identity. This is his life. It was very beautiful at once. His soul had become his bow, and now his hopes charred past. And lastly, his death, which was extinguished future, meaning that his future is gone now. But from this, I didn't only get that he died from it, and the flames that were killing him throughout his life, that they're finally done, and he's dead. I also got that he's no longer in pain from this, and that all of the pain that he was going through just kind of stopped. The performance, I said, illustrates an emotional break in the children of the Holocaust, and the breaking of the violin symbolizing the complete loss of hope and faith. Because his character was described very childish almost. He was very happy and vibrant, and now he's just like, this was my life, and it's over, and it's sad.
So furthermore, when we see how Felix dies, he dies with a cold, and he lays down in the snow. And then we can see see how he like she said, he died peacefully, knowing that everything was going to be okay, and that shows how kind of like the symbolism in the snow, how it was after he died, he lay down and he was like forever peacefully dead. And then chapter 2, page 85. Chapter 6, page 5. Sorry. It states, an icy wind was blowing violently when we marched without faltering. So this shows the motif of weather conditions, that how this relates to the struggle against the harsh conditions the Jews have to go through. And this also relates to the theme that people are capable of unfaithful cruelty whenever the ices are forcing them to run faster, and also relates to the theme of fate versus free will, how they can't control the weather and what is happening during that event. And we also can see symbolism of snow in page 90. So there's like a little quote that it was really powerful, and it says, "Heavy snow continued to fall over the corpses." Well, I said in this case, the snow provides a peaceful contrast to the challenge they suffer through, such as the death and all that's happening around. And though the bitter cold is actually speeding up death, for many it's as if the snow is providing these victims the ability to simply fall asleep and never wake up. And that's why on page 88, Elise's father stated that it's dangerous to fall asleep in the snow, because then once you sleep in the snow, you are asleep forever. Also, the same quote that I showed you on page 90. So it shows how as the snow covers the corpses, they are forgotten. And if you think about it, well, snow is like white and covers, it's like a blanket covering the forgotten men who died without no justification, but because of the inhumanity, the cruelty, which relates back to the theme of how human are incapable of faithful cruelty. So at the end of chapter 2, page 96. Chapter 6. We can see the symbolism of snow. So it's right down the bottom where it states, "A thick layer of snow was accumulating on our blankets. We were given bread, the usual ration. We threw ourselves in it. Someone had the idea of quenching his thirst by eating snow. Soon we were imitating him. We took our spoons and ate the snow off our neighbor's back, a morsel of bread and a spoon of snow." Well, and here it emphasizes the symbol of snow, because the symbol, it's a symbol that is brought peaceful death to many, just like symbolizes like nourishment, like how they are given, how they kind of like a survival guide. Like when they are thirsty, they eat snow as a sign of survival and nourishment.
like to reiterate, I guess you would say, that throughout the whole chapter, we're kind of giving these like signs and imagery of like death and dehumanization and kind of just like this overall terrible time within like human history. I would like to go back to what Sahara was talking about with the violin, how it was trampled. I said this was animalistic imagery in that the actual like knowing that he was dead and like facing Ellie with his violin trampled next to him and it was all broken apart and stuff. It kind of shows how like everyone was kind of forgotten and that these people who have spent so much time with their life are just kind of a ghost in the wind. They're just no more. There's nothing left to them or anything. Not saying that as a bad thing, saying it as just such a dehumanizing moment in our time. I would like to read you guys the first page, 85 of chapter 6. It starts with, the SS made us increase our pace. Faster, you tramps, you flea-ridden dog. Why not? Why not? Moving faster made us a little warmer. The blood flowed more readily in our veins. We had the feeling of being alive. Faster, you filthy dog. You were no longer marching, we were running, like animatrons. The SS were running as well, weapons in hand. We looked as though we were running from them. The night was pitch black. From time to time, a shot exploded in the darkness. They had orders to shoot anyone who could not sustain the pace, their fingers on the triggers. They did not deprive themselves of the pleasure. If one of us stopped for a second, a quick shot eliminated the filthy dog. I was putting one foot in front of the other like a machine. I was dragging this emaciated body that was still such a weight. If only I could have shed it. Though I tried to put it on my mind, I couldn't help thinking that there were two of us, my body and I hated that body. I kept repeating to myself. So through this, we're talking, in context, it's the SS is making them march through the night to get to this different area, but it shows a lot of animalistic imagery and also robotic imagery. Whenever the SS is referring to them as these flea-ridden dogs, and they're kind of almost chasing them, kind of showing a predator-prey relationship that the Jews are kind of almost like, as I would say to like relate, it's almost like they're sheep and the SS are wolves trying to hunt them. So also he kind of goes back and forth between using animatronic imagery and robotic imagery along with the actual animalistic imagery, and then he says that they kind of were forced to march and they couldn't stop like machines. They were almost preset to just keep going and never stop. But also I found it kind of interesting that even Ellie kind of agrees with them that they're filthy dog. It's weird because he says if one of us stopped for a second, a quick shot eliminated the filthy dog. And it kind of almost shows like the trauma that they felt and that they were also just kind of accepting of the situation. They were like, this is what life is. On page 94, it states, I tried to rid myself, and it's in the middle, I tried to rid myself of my invisible assassin. My whole desire to live became concentrated in my nails. I scratched, I fought for a breath of air. I tore at decaying flesh that did not respond. So in this quote, he's basically talking about the struggle for his life and that he's trying to gasp for air, in which he relates to his life being within his nails. And it kind of relates to an animal almost trying to, I guess, claw free and survive, as is seen in nature. And it kind of relates to the overall chapter in that this whole chapter is all about them trying to survive through this terrible time and the march and the actual just sitting in the camps.
Alright, picking up right where he left off about his struggle for life, he would struggle to save himself. 1 minute left. I tore decaying flesh that did not respond. I was struggling with a dead man? Question mark. So here he's fighting for himself, but throughout this there's family bonds that are very heavily instilled, such as on page 91, near the bottom, I'm just going to really skim over it for time constraints. Rabbi, I can't pronounce his last name, Elihu, continued his search for his beloved son. Oh God, Master of the universe, please give me strength to never do what Rabbi Elihu's son has done to him, has done. In context, his son felt a burden of his father, and so he tried to leave and relinquish his father, hoping that his father would die, just so that he could live himself. This relates to the theme of humans being capable of unimaginable cruelty. However, Eli does the same thing, or he fears he will do the same thing. I went to page 96, where this is the first selection in which Eli and his father were not placed at the same place. My father was sent to the left. I ran after him. An SS officer shouted at my back, "Come back." What I wrote here is that the selection is the greatest destruction of family bonds, and that this is the first time the selection or fate has separated them. Rabbi Elu and his son were foreshadow a similar fate for Eliezer and his father